Hi, everybody. So, in this portion of our learning, we're going to focus on another really important 21st century skill, and that is how we ask questions. We've done a little bit of that along the way. I've asked you guys to generate questions, and then you guys have found ways to use your inquiry skills to respond to those questions. And so this lesson is really a skill builder to really help you to know how to ask good questions and to make sure you kind of have an understanding of the way to do that because there's really a way, there's a process to do that. So really, we're thinking about ways we can ask questions. It's going to really lead us to learning cool things. So first, when I think about asking questions, the truth is that education is changing as a result of technology. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the way you are being educated is very different from the way your parents and me were educated back in the 80s and 90s. Um, we don't have to memorize a lot of factual information anymore as a result of technology. For example, I'm just going to go on Google really quick and I'm going to ask Google a question and let's see what happens. So, hey, Google, in what country are the tallest people in the world? Okay, and it tells me that the answer is the Netherlands. And I'm surprised that she didn't speak out loud because I usually have her speak out loud. I'm going to try again. Hey, Google, where are the tallest people in the world? She's not talking to me. She's being really rude. But the answer is the Netherlands. When would I ever need to know that? I honestly can't think of that as being an important piece of information. So, what I'm finding is those kinds of questions that you can just quickly ask Google. I mean, the only way that I would need to know where the tallest people in the world are is if maybe I was like trying to sell a product like really, really high ceilings or something like that. And I wanted to know which country would be my best market. I don't know. The point is that it's not really an important question. So, what makes questions important? Well, I'm going to think about a really, really important question that's being asked right now, and that is COVID-19 helping the environment? Okay, is the environment getting better as a result of this global pandemic? So I'm going to ask Google that and see what happens. Hey, Google, is the COVID-19 pandemic helping the environment? And Google doesn't give me an answer, it gives me more questions. I've got what is happening with climate change as a result of COVID-19? What is happening with the air as a result of COVID-19? What is happening to species who were going extinct as a result of COVID-19? So the point is, it's asking more questions in order to be able to really respond to this really tricky question. So I want you guys to think about this elephant that I've been bringing up once in a while in order to find the whole elephant, which is really that important, compelling question. We have to ask more questions to find out the information that we need. Some of that information is not going to sound the same as some of the other information. So either that means, like if someone's saying, well, an elephant is like a snake, or an elephant is like a wall, or an elephant is like a sail, um, those are all very different things, and we need to figure out the whole picture, which is why some of our source credibility skill is going to come in. This is why I have you guys evaluate sources and tell me what markers of credibility are there so that you can draw conclusions to get the whole picture. Now, what makes a question compelling? Well, the word compelling means like get you up off your feet and make you want to do something. Okay, it actually like drives you. It makes you think things and believe things that make you want to take action. So a compelling question has some characteristics. It's going to be open-ended. You're not going to be able to say, "Hey Google," and have it give you the answer like Netherlands. Okay, it's going to probably require more questions in order to really get an understanding of it. The answer to a compelling question actually really matters. Like this could be world changing. This could be something that causes you to change the way you think or change what you do. It could have an impact on the world as a result of that. So when we say compelling, these types of questions compel us. They drive us to act on something, to make a change, to think differently. Okay, so these are the important types of questions that we want to ask. Now, supporting questions fall under the umbrella of that compelling question. Google modeled that for me because when I said, is COVID-19 helping the environment? Google was like, well, it depends. Okay, they couldn't just tell me one answer. It started asking more questions and linking me to sources where those types of questions were going to be asked by people. So a supporting question is what I want you guys to work on. Compelling questions, leave it to me right now. I'm the teacher. I'm going to say, this is the big one we're going to ask. But the supporting questions, I want you guys to start to figure out how to ask. So what is it that I need to know so that I can answer that compelling question? These questions tend to be fact-based, but remember, the answers could look different depending on what part of the elephant you're touching, which is why we need to look at markers of credibility. Okay, they can be looked up. They might have different answers depending on the source, and that is why you have to evaluate your sources for markers of credibility. Okay, here's a sample. Go all the way back in your memory to like October when we were asking about overpopulation. And this was the compelling question that I gave you. These were the supporting questions we asked. In order to know if we should be concerned about overpopulation, we kind of need to know, well, is population growing? Are we in danger of running out of resources? Where in the world are people suffering due to there being too many people? What are governments and people doing to prevent an overpopulation problem? And what are places doing that do not have a population problem? And can we apply those practices to the places that are overpopulated? So these are the supporting questions that we asked. I gave most of these questions to you so that you could get the facts and answer this compelling question. What you concluded is, most of you concluded, that population can be a problem if it doesn't stabilize. So some people were like alarmists, and some people were like, no, everything's going to be okay, but it could be a problem if population doesn't stabilize. You determined that places that have expansive populations, and we did the population pyramids, so the places that were like big, huge fertility rates, and then every age cohort it dropped off. Those are the places that have a problem with population, and they also have the lowest standards of living. So that is a problem. You also concluded that by improving healthcare and by improving education, bring up that literacy rate, bring down that infant mortality rate. That's going to prevent expansive populations. And then those populations will stabilize and maybe even become constricted. Okay, here's another example. This was, I want to say like November or December. We asked, why are some places wealthy while others are poor? That's the question I gave you. These are the supporting questions I helped you to find answers to. You researched it and you found answers to these questions. So what are the core countries doing that raises standard of living? What are periphery countries doing or not doing that keeps their standard of living low? Do core countries make it harder for periphery countries to develop? And how do governments make decisions to improve standard of living? So what you concluded was in some places they're poor because they don't have enough diverse industries. So if agriculture is their main industry and they don't also have like a service industry or some type of other export that only they design, that innovation that they actually have that not very many other places have, like Japan. Japan has such diverse industries and kind of had to because they were such a small country. They're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Some places are poor because they can't invest in healthcare and education. If you can't get a grip on these types of infrastructural things, your standard of living is going to stay low. People aren't going to be able to innovate and diversify their industries. And we also learned that places that are wealthy have generally been the ones that have taken over the places that are not wealthy. So, a history of colonization, a history of imperializing, and really exploiting some of these places for their resources or for their labor. We've, seen slavery, places where they've been taken for these kinds of things have had a really hard time diversifying, investing. We learned that there's a lot of political upheaval, so it's really hard for them to get on track. Okay, so one more model, and then I'm going to have you guys try it. One question we asked around December, was what should the US immigration policy be? And our questions were, well, what is our current immigration policy? And what are some of the problems that happen because of immigration? And what are some of the good things that happen because of immigration? And why do people migrate in the first place? Why don't you just stay where you are? Where are people migrating to? And what we found is that some of us believed we need to protect our borders. Okay, there are all of these things happening in the world with policies, with problems, some good things, but the reasons why people migrate is because they have push factors. They have to leave. And many times they're coming to places like the United States where there are pull factors, where there's a strong economy and there are jobs and generally there are freedoms. So some people said, protect your borders, closed door. Some people said, open door. There's no reason why we shouldn't allow people in because there are positive outcomes to immigration. And then some of you drew the conclusion as a result of all of this information that we just need to address the push factors. We need to help countries to diversify their economies, to establish infrastructure, to build up their education, to reduce crime and violence. Okay, so even though we had some different conclusions, it was as a result of these inquiry questions. So, how do I know if I'm asking enough questions? How do I know if I'm asking all the important questions? Because Mrs. Sheeler's been giving you these questions. For the most part, you haven't been asked to ask questions. So, here's how you do it. First, you want to make sure you're asking some geographical questions, which we worked on the very first unit of this class. What is happening in these places? Where is it happening in the world? Why is it happening in these places specifically? And why does it matter? We learn to ask economic questions or development questions. What's the GNI? What's the literacy rate? What's the infant mortality rate? What percentage of population is employed in agriculture? What is life expectancy? These are the kinds of economic development questions that will help us to answer compelling questions. Population questions. What can I find out about the people? These are the demographical questions that you usually can find out by going to CIA World Factbook. Where are people living? How old are they? What are their ethnicities? What percentage of the population is fill in the blank? Two more types of questions we want to focus on. Migration questions. Why are people leaving? And where do people go? So your push factors and your pull factors. And then our cultural and our religious questions. What do people believe? What do they value? How, I have a typo there, sorry, but how do their beliefs impact the way they live? So in other words, what are their customs and traditions as a result of what they believe and value? What are some of the forces that are centrifugal? What are some of the forces that are centripetal? Okay, so it's your turn to practice. I just modeled how we ask these questions. I basically have been doing it for you. I'm going to give you guys a chance to practice with the unit on religion. Okay, I'm going to take you through the types of questions to ask. You're going to ask them, and then you're going to give each other feedback to see if anything is missing. Okay, after that, I'm going to have you take the benchmark assessment for the new unit that we're working on now on conflict and genocide. So what you're going to do is show me that you can ask supporting questions without my help. Okay, of course, I will be giving you feedback. Of course, you can revise, but I want to see what you guys can do after practicing. Okay, let's move on to